Spooky Town, Samira's Revenge by S.M.G. Reddy. Once upon a time, in a place called Spooky Town, it had been over a year since the events of Halloween and the battle with the Three. After defeating the evil that was terrorizing Spooky Town, Dennis and Shaun became confident that everything is possible when friends have their back. They kept having fun, with Dennis being his mischievous self all the time. Shaun too kept up with the pranks and tricks his friends was doing. Winter came and went, spring too. When summer came, their friends left for vacations with their families, leaving both boys by themselves. But they were happy to find out that their parents wanted to send them to summer camp, so they wouldn't be so left out and miss all the fun. This kind of trip would be a real adventure, so both Shaun and Dennis look forward to that very much. They didn't know what it would look like, but imagine lots of outdoor games and so many tricks they could play on each other. When they arrived at Camp Moonstone, the boys were really glad to be away from their homes. After all, it was summer, time for playing and messing around. Camp Moonstone was on the outskirts of Spooky Town, and it was packed full of activities, the kind of place the boys could enjoy. Apart from them, about 20 others were staying there, all 11 or 12 years old, tall and short, slim and bulky, athletic and nerdy looking. They were all so different. The camp leader was a teacher, Mr. Michael, who seemed more into getting the boys inspired by archery, survival tips and other things that camp was supposed to teach the boys during their stay. Dennis and Shaun were excited after their teacher's greeting and wanted to get into everything. Unfortunately, the first day was really boring for the boys, as they were shown their cabins and all around the camp. Shaun and Dennis noticed the dining area with rows of tables and a kitchen in the back. They walked past the archery range and some other places, which are used in crafting, teaching survival skills. Even though the boys didn't do any of the activities they wanted, by the evening they were tired and hungry. So when the camp gathered at the dining area and the boys got their food, Shaun and Dennis ate everything quickly. After that, all the boys scattered around their cabins to get ready for bed. Shaun and Dennis shared a cabin with 4 other boys. Fortunately, their roommates were fun and glad to become friends. Only one of them, Liam, was quiet and perched up on top of the bed with a book. The others had a fun conversation, getting to know each other, until slowly they started changing into pajamas and getting into their beds. The only ones who didn't want to sleep yet were Dennis, Shaun, and another boy by the name of Will. Will was a very curious boy and managed to find something in their cabin when he got there. It was hidden under one of the floorboards, wrapped in a piece of old cloth. "We could have fun with this," he showed Dennis and Shaun a strange, old-looking glass orb. Dennis recognized it. It looks just like the one we saw in the witch's house on Crooked Corner. He also noticed the letter K branded on one side of the mysterious globe. "It's magical. We can contact a ghost or something," Will said. "Maybe we can see the future." They all laughed. The boys agreed to give it a try. They found some candles and settled in the far corner of the cabin, where they started trying to contact a spirit or a ghost. At first they were all laughing and distracting each other, but then suddenly the room darkened and the orb started shivering and lighting up. "Stop that," Shaun said to Dennis, thinking he was pranking everyone. "I'm not doing anything." Dennis raised his hands, and the boys saw that the orb was still shaking. Shaun and Will slowly let go of the glass orb and watched as it jumped onto the floor. None of them were touching it, but it moved and rolled to the corner. Finally, a voice echoed the word "hello," and the boys froze. "Hello?" Will asked, feeling scared that the magic actually worked. The orb started spelling out letters. Shaun was quick and wrote it down. "Can you help me?" Shaun spelled out what the invisible guest was showing them. "Help you how?" Dennis was excited and scared at the same time. leaning in to see the magic ball up close. "I'm lost," the orb spelled out. Then it told them to each touch the magic orb and imagine a door that would start opening. Once the boys followed the instructions, the sky outside rumbled with thunder. "Is something wrong?" Will asked, but the orb told them no, and the boys calmed down. A few minutes later, the boys felt a very cold wind that surrounded them for just a moment, and then everything suddenly ended. The wind blew out the candles, and for a second or two, the boys sat frozen by fright in the dark. Finally, Will found the switch and turned the lights on. The boys stood silent for a few minutes, trying to find out if the spirit is still there. But everything was quiet, and the orb lay on the floor, not moving. "I think we've had enough for the evening," Will said. Dennis and Shaun agreed and helped him clean up after their little experiment. Will put the orb back under the wooden floorboards where they had found it. And everything was done, the boys climbed into their beds and fell asleep. Later, in the middle of the night, Shaun opened his eyes and saw the deep woods in Spooky Forest. Everything was dark and the earth under his feet was cold. There was a thick mist that was floating above the tree line, and the boy stepped forward, watching the mist move from under his feet with every step. Suddenly he heard a distant whisper and stopped. 3 is such a good magic number. Then he heard a familiar voice scream, "Thank you so much for releasing me." As the thought pierced Shaun's mind, he stared into the darkness of the woods. Chills ran down his back. The boy ran off, trying to run away from the voice, but wherever he went, the witch's voice followed, whispering and haunting him. She seemed to be everywhere. Tossing and turning, Shaun battled his nightmare until finally he broke free. The next morning in Camp Moonstone, the boys woke up to the sun shining and the birds singing. It was time to get ready for the day. "Are you okay?" Dennis asked as he walked up to his friend. "I just had a stupid dream. I'm fine," Shaun answered, getting up. He was happy to see the sunlight after the darkness he had felt in his dream. After breakfast, the teacher handed out really neat Camp Moonstone silver pins to everyone. "Wow, limited edition," shouted Dennis. The boys put them on their shirts and showed them off, happy to have something that they could take home as a memory of their camping adventure. The day started out great, and Dennis and Shaun were excited about everything Mr. Michael promised. Shaun forgot all about his nightmare, and the thoughts of Samira faded. The teacher started showing the boys some fun stuff, like how to shoot from a bow and throw javelins. Even though the arrows and javelins were safe rubber for practice, the boys enjoyed imagining themselves as warriors that were ready to take their enemy into an epic battle. Dennis and Shaun actually got praised by the teacher while they were throwing the short javelins into the targets. Dennis would never admit it, but he was a little jealous of Shaun because he was really good at it. After lunch, Mr. Michael took all the kids into the woods. It was time to learn some survival and tracking skills. The boys jumped into the new knowledge, finding it very interesting to know the prints and tracks animals make. This could help them follow anything they wanted. When the boys returned to the camp, they were tired and hungry, but extremely happy to have enjoyed such an adventure. Soon, the evening came and the boys finally had some free time to roam about and see what else there was within the camp. Some boys gathered to watch movies, others started playing video games. There were some who roasted marshmallows outside the cabin. Dennis and Shaun, however, didn't know if they wanted any of these extra activities, so they simply explored and shared with each other some ideas on what to do tomorrow. Suddenly, Shaun stopped Dennis and frowned. "Did you hear that?" he asked his friend. Dennis wanted to shrug his shoulders but froze. The boys heard a distant howl, long and chilling to the bones. "I didn't know wolves lived here," Dennis said, shivering from the cold gust of wind. Shaun kept silent, thinking that it might be a sign of something else, but instead of thinking about it, he shrugged it off and continued walking to their cabin. Mr. Michael passed by and hurried them to their beds because the evening was already growing dark. The boys ran off towards their beds, spooked by the possibility that wolves might come to the camp at night. While the others fell asleep very fast, Dennis tossed and turned in his bed. Finally he stood up and walked to the window, looking out. The dark hid all the other cabins and buildings within the camp. Only bushes and trees could be seen moving under the wind. Suddenly, the boy noticed a shadow. It darted from behind a tree and ran off into the dark, leaving Dennis shaking with fright. He stepped back slowly and stumbled to his bed, where he covered himself with a blanket, head to toe. The picture of the strange creature haunted him until he managed to cry himself to sleep. In the morning after breakfast, the boys gathered around the campfire. Mr. Michael started telling the boys some local stories and legends. He shared with them that the camp is named after a legendary stone that can be found standing by the river. The Moonstone had carvings all around it and was thought to be magical. It was thought that the moonlight can show where the necromancer from the woods had lived in a hidden cave. Everyone wanted to know if anyone found the cave, but Mr. Michael answered that though attempts were made, it was never found. It's just a story, he said. Later that evening, with everybody busy with their extra activities, Shaun and Dennis walked to the Moonstone, the big rock that stood on the far side of the camp. Looking at the carvings, they could see how old it was, and there was a hole, just like Mr. Michael said. Dennis nudged his friend and pointed to the stone. Look, he said. The moon above their heads shined brightly, and its rays hit the hole, passing through and shining into the forest. The boys marked one of those trees on the raised path and hurried back to the dining hall. The next day when they were free, they went to check the direction of the moon's ray from last night. They followed the path and found a rocky formation with a small cave inside. The boys ventured in. It was fun exploring something like this, but at some moment Shaun stumbled over a rock and fell. He wanted to kick the rock, but then he noticed there was a hole right next to his foot. He reached inside and found a bundle. When he took off the old dusty cloth, he saw a thick old magic spell book. This unexpected find was exciting to both the boys, and they returned feeling proud of themselves. Little did they know of the danger that was lurking. Later that night in Camp Moonstone, the first thing they heard was the voice of their enemy, the witch Samira. She laughed and taunted the boys, thanking them for helping her come back to life. As the boys from the camp gathered outside, they all saw the witch, surrounded by a pack of wolves. The creatures growled and grinned at the boys, showing their sharp fangs. Mr. Michael tried his best to keep everyone calm, but when he walked to the witch, ignoring Dennis's warning, a wolf chased him off, making him hide in one of the cabins. After that, it was chaos. The beast started chasing everyone around, trying to snatch the boys, but their prey was too fast and brisk, so the boys managed to get away, taking cover in the dining hall. We have to fight Samira. If she goes, the wolves will follow, Dennis said. Shaun took out the book they found in the rocky cave and looked through the pages. Finally, he found a spell that was called Banish Evil. He showed the spell to Dennis, and the boys quickly realized what to do. Before anyone could stop them, they ran out the hall. The witch disappeared into a dark mist, leaving a small pack of wolves behind. She has turned into a cat. We can track her. Come on, Dennis shouted and ran off. Shaun followed, but the wolves chased after them. Dennis looked over his shoulder and tripped. Fortunately, the beast that jumped at him slowly tore his shirt, taking a piece of it. Suddenly, the creature jumped aside, whimpering and scratching at its mouth, when suddenly, poof, and a cloud of smoke suddenly dissolved where the wolf just stood. Dennis looked closely and noticed the silver pin on the torn part of his shirt. It was the only thing that was left. Oh, that's interesting, he said, rushing to pick up his pin. More wolves were approaching quickly, but the boys heard a loud battle cry and noticed their roommates running to save their new friends. They are werewolves. The silver pins hurt the beasts, Dennis shouted to his friends. The boys, with Will leading the attack against the furry beasts, quickly pushed back the attackers with javelins. They tore their pins off their shirts and threw them at the wide open mouths of the werewolves. Poof, poof, puffs of smoke fell to the ground, making the pack smaller and smaller with each second. Very soon the werewolves were gone, and the boys walked up to Dennis and Shaun. Thank you for your help. We are going after the witch before she summons any more evil, Shaun said. showing the book of spells they found. Will agreed to come with them and sent the others back to the camp just in case any werewolves might still be prowling around in the dark. The boys parted and the three adventurers set off to track down the witch. Will helped Dennis to find the tracks Samira left on the forest floor. Very soon, they came to a cave entrance. Shaun opened the book at the page with the spell and nodded to his friends. "You distract her, and I'll read the spell," he whispered. The boys walked inside. Dennis and Will ahead and Shaun a little bit behind. The cave was lit by candles and torches. They were jammed into the rocks and ground. Soon the boys approached the cavern and saw the witch, who was chanting some kind of spell in front of the burning fire. "Now," Dennis whispered the command, and the boys jumped out, distracting the witch, who immediately jumped to her feet and lunged at one of the boys. Shaun began reading the spell, concentrating on the witch. "I can smell your fear," Samira screamed as she tried to corner the friends. "I will have my revenge." Her voice echoed around the dark cave. While she was running after Will and Dennis, Shaun continued to read the spell, feeling the air crackle with power around him. "No, no!" Suddenly the witch cried out, and the spell Shaun was chanting set off. A bolt of lightning struck the witch, dropping her to the floor. Samira screamed, and her body covered by small cracks, as if glass were about to be broken. The cracks grew and covered her whole body, until suddenly the witch shattered into small pieces that quickly dissolved into green smoke and disappeared. Shaun slammed the book shut, very proud of himself and his friends. "This should do it," he said. "Let's get out of this foul place." The boys exited the cave and returned to the path that led to Camp Moonstone, cheering at their victory over the evil witch. But because of the thick treetops, they didn't see the moon above their heads turning bright red. And so, another new day had finally come. They checked under the floor of the cabin, but the mysterious magical orb had disappeared. They had no idea as to its true purpose or value. They were too busy looking forward to getting home. The boys all said goodbye to their new friends. Shaun thanked Will and spoke, "If you're ever in town, make sure to drop by." Poor Mr. Michael was taken to Central Hospital for a checkup. He was still very confused about the events of last night. Our little heroes boarded a bus ready to go. "I can't wait to tell Charlie and Emma," Shaun said. "Yes, I wonder how they got on," Dennis pondered. They had many new stories to tell and were surprisingly happy to return to school and update their friends, totally unaware of what was waiting in the darkness about to reveal itself. The battle was won and the evil witch was banished to the underworld, unaware that the red sky is a signal that something far eviler and more treacherous is coming. Today Shaun and his friends have prevailed once again. The dark clouds have been lifted over Spooky Town, at least for now. Until next time, the end.